All right, so to continue from where I left off, sorry for the break in transmission. So, I had to quickly do something, so I had to stop the video. So, this is a continuation from the last video. So, now this is a withdrawal function, and I'm printing out the account balance before withdrawal. So, to print out the amount just before I withdraw from that person's account. So you need to have an ID that you use to identify each person who creates an account inside this database. All right. So now, if the amount that I'm trying to withdraw, if it is not bigger than what is inside my account balance, then you want to proceed and withdraw that amount. You can come here and paste the result, and then you can print out account balance after withdrawal. So account balance after withdrawal. After I have withdrawn, I want to print out the account balance. All right, so let's look at the next function we will be creating. All right, so check now, we are done with the deposit and the withdrawal function. We have looked at how to create an account. Now let us proceed with the while loop so that we can be able to log in if the person is, if we have already created that user, or to, now if the user is not there, we want to see how we can create an account for that user. All right, so we want to proceed down to using the while loop. So I'm going to use the while loop so that my program can run continuously over and over again until I specify a condition that allows me to break out. Now, the while loop will print out something to the screen. It will print out login and create account. That's what I want it to print out. So you can come here and say print, open a quotation mark, login /n. Of course, we already know what this does. Takes your code to the next line, create account. All right, so now after I have done this, you want to now come here and say option. You want to create a variable called option, and this variable of course has to be of the integer data type, and you are going to use the input function, which we have already treated, to be able to, it's going to ask us, and or tell us rather to enter an option. But just to be clear that I have taught this thing, I don't want a situation whereby I would talk about a concept that I did not treat. So I think I have the file already here, and if you guys have been following my program, I'm sure you guys too should have the same file. Yes, you should have the same file. So bank management system, switch it back. So now it's going to tell you enter an option. Enter an option. Whichever option you enter is going to, you can come here and say if option. So if option is equivalent to 1. So now we are trying to now set it up. So if I'm pressing 1, I want to proceed to do something. I want to log in. So in order for you to log in, you need to enter a username and a password. Now, if that username is valid, it's going to log in. But if it is not valid, it will not log in. Now you can come here and create a variable. I will just call it user is equal to input, enter user. Come here and say password is equal to int. Of course, it has to be an integer. You are going to configure that input. Then you see enter password. So this one will be enter username, enter password. Now, if you have entered the username. Alright, I will now create a conditional statement that if password is equivalent, then you call that your database again. Now also, you also want to be able to ensure that now we're not really using, I'm going to create an ID before this user because we need to be able to use the ID, not the user. It's not the user we're trying to do. So what I will do, we don't really, that's not how we use to identify. Although you can still use the person's name to identify the person, but I would prefer to use an ID so that it can be very, very easy and straightforward. So ID, I'll come here and say int, convert it to an integer, and then I'll come here, say enter identification. So you now say if database ID, then you can now let's go and check the database password. So if it's equal to the same password that is inside that database, and you want to log in, you want to print out. Um, so I can write an and command here. So and. So I think I would need to introduce the username here. So the username is equal to input. I will explain why. Because you want a situation whereby it will welcome you. It will welcome you if it discovers that your name is valid. So username, to enter username. So and username is equivalent to the database ID at user. So you check it when I was creating my account user. You come here and you can print out a message that says welcome, welcome, and you can enter the name there, username. So let's go back to our structure, what we're trying to design, our design file. So after I've logged in, it wants to now tell me to deposit and withdraw. So this is where we now have the control that controls our deposits, our depositing and our withdrawal. You can now come here and say print again, print, and write number 1, say deposit, then your \n again, 2 dot withdraw, withdraw. So after that, you can now decide to now create a conditional statement. But before you do that, you want to create another option. You can say option 2. So I'm giving it option 2 so that it will not clash with this option I already wrote. So you can just come here and say, of course, you want it to be an integer, obviously. The inputs, you have enter option. So enter option, then you can now come and create a conditional statement here. Now say if option 2 is equivalent to 1, so now you want to now perform a deposit. You want to perform a deposit. So I'm going to call the function that I used to deposit. So you want to scroll up to that function and check it to deposit. Now come here. Now that function has some variables there. It has some variables. So it has an ID and an amount. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to enter any ID. Now you can see that this conditional statement is nested inside this conditional statement. So it's assuming that this is the ID it is going to use to deposit into that person's account. So if that person is valid, it's going to deposit that amount you are going to enter into the person's account. So what you want to come here is to create a variable, call it amount. I can give it a float data type, and I will say input. So I'm trying to enter some float value. So enter amount. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to enter an amount. After I've entered the amount, you come here and say deposit, and you enter the ID, obviously, of that person, ID amount. Period. That's how it works. Then to print out the options that you have there. But if you are entering another option, let me check. Yeah, okay, now we are still dealing with option one. We haven't yet gone to the create account yet. So this is assuming that the person is in existence. I'll say if option 2 is equivalent to 2, and you want to come here and perform the same thing, you can call it amount 2, you can call this one amount 1 so that it will not clash. You say float, you want to do the same thing, impute, what? Okay, yeah, true, impute. Then you have your enter amount, right? And you change it to amount 1 also because the value has updated so that they would not be the same. So you come and say withdraw, you want to pass your ID and your amount 2. All right, so this is what is going to happen if I am logging in with the right details or right credentials. So after I've entered the option, so this will only happen, this will only log in if the person's password, if the password I'm entering is equal to the password in that database for that ID, and if the username too is also equal to that person's ID and username. But if I discover that I'm entering a wrong credentials, something is going to happen. So I'll come here and I'll say else. So this else is for this if conditional statement. So else print out wrong entry or invalid identification. So you notice how I trace the else condition. It matches this conditional statement here. So if the person's password and username that if the username and password which I'm entering for the person, if it's wrong, then it's going to print this out. And if you can still remember our truth table when we looked at conditional statements, that's the reason why I'm using and in regards to the conditional statements we talked about. So now we are done with if we are logging in. But what of when we are creating an account? Because if you can remember, we created another option for creating an account. So you are going to trace down this if condition down here. We're going to trace it down here and come here. You now say else elif option. If you're looking at option, the equivalent to 2. So if I am pressing 2, what's going to happen? So I want to create an account. Now let's go and check our data. You can see that here I have a function that allows me to create a dictionary and make the value of that dictionary the value of a key. Now that key will be the ID or will be an ID. All right. So you come down here and you can now start entering all the values. So I'm doing that. It's going to ask for user, password, email, amount. So user 1, so impute, enter username. Enter username. So user, password, email, amount. So password of course to be an integer. Password, email impute, email, user, password, email, amount. I'll just say amount 3 so that they would not be the same. Float, enter amount. Then you come here, then you call that function. You call. So I will still do some things that I did not do. So the function name is create account. And of course, you have to enter the ID. Obviously, you have to enter the ID. So I'll call it ID1 is equal to int integer. All right, so I'll come here and say input enter identification number, enter ID number. And you can come here and say create account and pass your ID1, pass your user1, pass your password 1, pass your email 1, pass your amount 3. All right, so now in order for this code to be valid, you want to come here and you want to update. You know, I told you that we are going to be passing this save function for each time we perform an update. Also, when I perform a deposit, you want to come and call the function here. And when I perform a withdrawal, you want to also come here and perform a save. You understand? And then if I'm entering the wrong option from login or create account, you can also come here and add an extra one in order for you to break out of your program. You can just come here and say exit. Then you trace it down. After your if, you have your elif. You can come here and say and create another condition here. So if you are typing 3, so elif option equivalent to 3, you can just break out. But before you break out, you can just print out a sentence that says exiting program. Now you can modify this program as much as you want, but I'm just keeping it simple for now. So this is just a very simple banking program. So we have to test it to see if it works. So mind you, I don't have any file called database file initially here, as you can see. It's just database.json. But by the time we run this program and we perform our first update, it's going to create this file called database file.json. So we're going to run it, but I want to just ensure that there are no errors anywhere, because as the program gets larger, or rather it's good practice to be testing your program for each time you add substantial code to your program. So you need to update your program rather. So let us try to test this out, assuming I've done everything correctly. All right, so you just change it to current file. Now we already know that we don't have. So let us try and log in. So 1, enter identification. If I say 1, all right. So it's going to run everything anyway until it discovers that everything is false, and then to tell us invalid identification. As you can see, we have not created anybody yet, but you can allow it to stop you in its track immediately. So we can do something to that. We don't want it to proceed to tell you to enter everything before it performs the operation. So if it asks you to log in, like what it did for me, let me check the program again. It said enter an option. I entered 1, and then I entered identification number. Let us go back there and check for the identification number. So as soon as I enter ID, it has to check if ID is there, so that it can either break out, not proceed to enter username or password. So if the ID is not there, it does not even proceed. So you can come here and say if ID is equal to database ID, right? So this is my database. I'm trying to see if the ID is there. If it's equal to database.id, you want to indent all your code, but else if it's not there, you want to just break out. So this code that is here like this, I want to indent it a little bit. Yeah, I want to indent it. So it's only it's only working under this. So if it is not there, I want to come here and say invalid identification. So it does not even proceed to tell you any other thing. You just come here and say else invalid identification. So let's try and run the program again the second time. So if I'm trying to log in and I enter, I just get okay. So now there's a problem somewhere. The reason is because it doesn't know if this ID is a number or not. You get a key error somewhere. Have a key error somewhere. Let us see where that is. Okay. Okay. So let me check something. We'll come back. Yeah. So not in database. I think that's better. So let us test this one out and see what we have. Okay, so it still proceeded. So, okay, we're going to check this logic, but let us launch our code normally from what we did initially. Then we're going to come back. We're going to look into this properly. But let me just redo what I did before so that we can run the program and see its normal result before we start to add more complex things to it. All right, so let me save my code and let me run my code from its initial state. Let me run it from its initial state. So let's assume we're trying to log in using data that does not exist. And I just say Alex and I say 1234. So we get key error 2. Okay. All right. So we need to be able to ensure that our values are of that data type. We need to be able to we need to ensure that they have that data type. So um, I just come here and I just create some value. Let me just do it from here. Then we check out our program. I can just say new ID equal to int ID, and I'll just use new ID instead. New ID, then just say new password and new amount. So new password equal to int um, password, and then new amount equal to float um, amount. I can just come here and pass the values instead of this. So new password, the new amount here. So let's just hope it works. New amount. It's assuming that the values have been changed, their data type, or specified the type of data that we want. Let us ensure that they have that data type. The key error, so the value is not there. So now The reason why it's giving us this error is because we don't have an initial dictionary created there. So let us try and create an initial dictionary. I should not have even done all this. It just occurred to me because we don't have an already existing dictionary there. So let us try to create a dictionary within this my dictionary as a demo. So I can have a dictionary that says one, and then I can have a username because I'm using the same thing, user, password, email, amount. So user Alex, user, password 1234, email alex12 at gmail.com, user, password, email, amount. So let us see if this is the problem. Guessing it should be the problem, but let us confirm. Maybe 150, 850. But 150, 850. Let us try it again. Let's try it again. So login, if I enter one, maybe David, and then 2345. You can see we get invalid identification. So it's because we didn't have an initial dictionary inside that dictionary before. That's why it did not know how it was going to pass the value. So we needed to pass an example so that Python would know the format, how it's going to be inserting dictionaries, and it's going to base that condition based on the values, because this is an integer obviously, but initially my dictionary did not have a nested dictionary in it, so that was why we were having those errors. All right. But you notice that after everything, I think it would have created that file, right? We have not yet done any creation yet, so it has not created the file. The file was not in existence. We have not launched this. It's only when we try to perform a create account, a deposit, and a withdrawal, that's when we're going to call this save function, which will then create this file. So let us proceed. Now you can even decide to add that other condition that allows us to break out immediately we discover that the identification is not correct. So let us go back and include it in our while loop. So immediately I have entered my identification number, I can come here and check if ID, database ID, then we're going to perform this. So if it's the same ID in the database, we're going to perform this. I'm going to perform this. What I'll do is that I'll just shift this else to be on the same line with it so that it print out invalid identification. Or rather, let me just enter another one. So I'll copy it, and then paste it. All right. So let us try the code again. So now if I try to log in and it asks me to enter an identification and I say 4, I still the same thing. Key error. Wonder why. Helps to solve the problem. Helps to solve the problem. So we have this should access this already. So why is it giving that error? Okay, I understand. So we cannot access keys. The contradictory statement. So we cannot access keys normally. That was my mistake, because if I'm accessing this key, it means I'm accessing the value of the key. The value of the key. So what I will do it now. We are doing this code from scratch. I don't have any materials I'm using it from, but we're going to solve this problem because it's very, very solvable. So what I will do is that I'm going to use a username instead, and I'm going to use the username instead as a condition. So what I will do is that instead of using the identification, instead of using the identification, I would instead use the user. So I'll just cut it from here and I'll put it here. And what I would do, I would say if ID or if username is equivalent to database ID user ID user. That means if I'm entering the correct user after I've accessed the ID, I want it to log in. But if I'm not, to print out invalid identification. So to proceed to ask you for the ID and the user. So let me use a different ID and a user and try to log in. So this is the ID, this is the user, Alex. So I'll just use 2 and Alex and let us see what it will give me. Let's run the program and let us proceed. So 1, so 2, and then Alex. Key error again. The name. So database ID and okay, the username, the ID, then the user. Okay. Key error. ID int the user. So I don't want to waste your time anyway. So I'll just make a correction on this code in the next video. So I don't want to waste time trying to debug it. So I really don't know why it's giving me an error, which we're going to address it in the next video. But for the meantime, so that we don't waste time, let's take out the condition and just use only this one for now. We're going to address it so that we can be able to perform our conditional check. So just stay tuned. I will treat it in the next video. So you go back and you remove this else conditional statements and we would run our code. So to check if you're entering option 1, it will prompt you to enter an identification number, a username, and a password, and to check if the password is what is inside the database. If it is there, to welcome the user and then to proceed for you to deposit and withdraw. But if it is not there, it will come down here and to print out invalid identification. So that it will let us try to run our code. I think you already saw the example already. If I say login and enter an identification number, enter the name James, enter 2345, we should have gotten invalid. What's going on here? It worked the first time. So it worked the first time, I wonder why it's not working again second time. So annoying. So the database hasn't changed. I wonder why it's not working. Still the same. This is key error. Copy the error now. And this is just wasting my time. It worked before. Password, username, ID, int identification. So ID, username, password, password. Alright, so we'll try to debug it. If we're not able to, yes, I can't waste your time. So alright. Okay, I think is that the issue? Is that the issue? Amount. I don't think that's the issue. ID, integer, password. Worked initially, now it's not working again. Let's try it again. Let me see if I can get the error. When this is wasting my time, really wasting my time, honestly speaking. Just why is it doing this? Making it like this. Check it to let me use Alex. Let me just try using proper values from Alex. So why is it not working when I write conditions? It's not working when I use conditional statements normally. So it's not using that, but it's working. It's logging in using the values, but it's not logging. It's not giving me the error message that I want to see. So I'm trying to address that issue. It's expected. It's supposed to give me the error message. That's what it's supposed to give me. Let me try it one more time. Let me try it one more time. Log in. Enter different identification number. David 455608. Key error 3. Key error 3. Why is it giving me key error 3? Alright, last time. Um, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it's like there's something wrong here. So he said invalid identification. So when I entered the identification number of 2 and I entered a different username and a different password, it worked. So apparently it needs to see that the identification number is there. That's the reason why. So it needed to see that this identification number is there from what I'm observing. Although I've never had this kind of error before, this kind of problem. So it needed to see the identification number before it can work. So, or rather, what I'm trying to say is that the identification number needed or needs to be in the database before it can actually work. If you use an identification number that is not there, it will not work. So let me try one again. Let me try and run the program again. If my theory is correct, 1 Jude 0 0. So it's working. It only works if the identification number is there. But anyway, what's happening is that we're just checking. I've already explained the logic to you already. I'm sure if you're following my program, you understand what I'm saying. So let us proceed. Honestly, we've wasted enough time, practically almost an hour. Let's try and see what we can salvage. So now we know that if we are trying to log into the database and the username and the password is not correct of that identification number, it comes down here and prints out invalid identification, and then it starts again asking you to log in. So let's now create an account. Come to create account. I want to enter an identification number of 2. I want to enter a username of Bright. I want to enter a password of 5678. I want to enter an email of bright at gmail.com. And when I click on enter, it will now ask me to enter an amount. And I'll see maybe 28704545. Now it has created the database. Has created the database. So we can confirm that sometimes it might not really update on time immediately. But one way you can confirm that it has created the JSON file is by right clicking here and coming down here to open in Explorer. And you see that you can come to your variables and simple data types. And you see that we have our database. What's the name of the file? The name of the file is database file.json. You can see that it has now appeared. It has now appeared. You can check it and you discover that this was the previous dictionary we had. And if you move your hand across, you will see the next dictionary we created. You can see the 2, you can see the user, you can see the password, the email, and the amount. Now, for some reason, you notice that it's writing the ID within double quotes. I don't know why that is. So I think it's because JSON files normally are written like that within double quotes. So that's why. But you can see that it has successfully created this database. So now let's say we want to perform a withdrawal or deposit. So let us try to log into that account using an identification number of 2, a username of Bright, and a password of 5678. So option log in, username of Bright, the password of 5678. If we get welcome Bright, so it has logged into Bright account. So now let's say I want to deposit, increase the amount in Bright account. You can come here now and click on deposit 1, and I want to deposit 250,500. So it says account balance before deposit, account balance after. So I did not spell it properly, that's why. So you go back to your code and you correct the error. So it's very, very simple error to correct. So amount, that was my bad. So amount, run your program again, log in to Bright account, 5678. Let's check what's his name. What is this one's problem now? right? So 2, 5, 6, 7, all right. I've never seen this count before in my life. All right, so identification number. All right, so I think the reason why is because the initial value, because of my database file, the keys are written as string values and I'm using integers. So I need to go back to my code and I will need to update that code so that it will stop changing the ID to integers. I think that's just where the problem is. Because if you notice in your JSON file, it is treated as a what's it called? String value. So I'm just tired already, so I don't want to waste your time, and I've wasted enough time already on this tutorial. How many minutes have I wasted already? 46 minutes. Still on the same problem. So no worry, we're together. We're going to finish this up. So what I will do, um, so instead of me using all this, I'll just change them back to the way they were. So password, amount, keeps giving errors. All right, so let us see what we can do now. So obviously, the database already has the next value, which is bright, with a key of 2 and a password of 5678. So we want to ensure that everything is not as an integer. I will check just to ensure that I'm doing everything correctly. You can check your ID, whatever the name is called, blah blah. Let's try it again and see if it's gonna work. So right, 5678. All right, so it works. So I'm sure we understand why it works because if you check your JSON file, you see that everything is a string value. So I had to make sure that everything is in unison. So let us try to deposit now. So deposit. I want to add maybe 350,000 into his account. So we get the account balance before deposit and the account balance after deposit. But that is not correct because if you can remember, um, I created an increment value so that we can be updating the value. In short, it had a previous amount of 87045. So let us try to correct this code. There's some problem. It's not updating properly. It is not updating properly. Not updating. So amount, try to add to that amount. So after I create the account, it's supposed to save this data. But let us try it a second time. Apparently, the value was not there. Let's assume that it was because of the error. That's why it did not work out. But you notice that okay, it has incremented the value. It has incremented it to 637045. And let us see the amount before and after withdrawal. Let's try it again. So login, identification number of 2, right, and 5678. Let us try to deposit. Let me add 50,000. This thing is not updating. It's not updating, which is not correct. It's supposed to show you the amount in the database before and after. I'm going to show you the amount in the database before and after. So there's something wrong with this database file. Apparently, it was when I messed with the value. So when I mess with the value, so what I will do in order to ensure that my code is being executed properly, because if you can see our logic is written out properly from the deposit, adding an amount from the withdrawal. So withdrawal is even wrong, minus, you are subtracting an amount, and you want to be saving everything to your database. So I really don't see why it's not working properly. So it's supposed to be saving this data to your database. So let us try it again. I want to create an account and enter a new identification number, Jeff 8888, Jeff at gmail.com, and maybe 350 250. Alright, so it has created the person's account. Let us log into Jeff's account. Jeff's identification number is 3, username Jeff, password 1234. So we get welcome Jeff. Then we want to deposit an amount, maybe 45 to 30. So the previous amount there was 350 250. So let's ensure that everything should be done properly. Alright, so I wonder why it's not working. This is giving a serious getting on my skin right now. 60. Man, this code is full of errors, full of serious errors. So 60 option. Okay. Let us check when we perform the deposit. All right. So using the ID. Okay. Amount. Put to enter the amount. Enter there. And this is just serious, just a drag. I wonder why it's not working properly. What I'll do is that I would upload the updated video. So I'll do that. All right. So if you've enjoyed the video so far, if you've enjoyed the previous corrections that we were able to make, you can just like the video, subscribe, and share to your friends. And we will see you again next time. It's goodbye for now.